Well, welcome everyone. I am Monica Grable, Arts Education Director for the Montana Arts Council, and we are so glad that you could join us for this session, the second installment of our Poetry Elevated workshop series. And I am program support for Poetry Out Loud and Poetry Elevated, but happy to be working with our Poetry Out Loud outreach coordinator, Kaisa Edy. Kaisa, take it away.
Hi, I am Kaisa Edy. I, like Monica said, am Poetry Outreach Coordinator this year for Poetry Out Loud. Just a little bit about myself. I live in Great Falls and I'm the mother of five kids. When I am not involved with Poetry Out Loud, I do that. So if there's any loud banging, that is where what it's coming from. But other than that, I am a poet and teach occasionally. I have a master's degree from Warren Wilson, where I got to study with some really wonderful mentors and teachers, and learn a lot about myself as a writer and what I was interested in and invested in the world and in writing itself. And I feel very honored to be speaking with Lowell today about writing and inspiration and what sort of gives us life behind words. And I'd really love to hear a little bit about Lowell himself from himself and maybe what keeps you inspired from a teaching perspective, but also from a writing perspective. So if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little tidbit to start us off, I would really love to hear, I guess, what keeps you coming back.
So I guess to start with, I'd say um, I once applied for a job teaching. Actually, it was in Prescott, Arizona. And the
Mm-hmm.
last question they asked me on the interview was, "Are you a writer who teaches or are you a teacher who writes?"
Oh.
And the person who asked the question I knew was also a writer. So I thought the right answer was, "I'm a writer who teaches."
Mm-hmm.
That's the wrong answer. I didn't get the job. But later on, I saw the truth in that I think I was for years a writer who teaches, but I've become a teacher who writes because I think the teaching
Mm-hmm.
has become more important than the writing. And I'm still teaching. So I've been at Flathead Valley Community College now. This is my 42nd year. So people
Wow.
people keep wondering when I'm going to leave. And I used to make a joke and I'd say, well, I'm not going to leave until they pry my office key from my cold, dead hand. And now I don't make that joke anymore because it's too close to the truth. So, but yeah, I love teaching. I absolutely love teaching, and I I I don't think I could give up teaching. As I think it'd be harder for me to give up teaching than it would be to give up poetry. Um, so yeah, I'm a poet. I was Montana Poet Laureate, which was a real thrill, the real highlight. And if you see a black thing moving around, it's my cat, who's probably going to upset the whole camera here and everything in a moment. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know where you guide me here, Kaisa. You be here goes there, there goes the cat.
Well, I think the idea of being a writer who teaches versus a teacher who writes is interesting because I think if you speak to so many teachers, something that you'll hear over and over again is the beauty of being a teacher is that you also sort of get to remain the student. And I think that really holds true, especially with writing and being around younger students. Just how much inspiration and just these little tidbits that you can gain from a younger generation, just how we continue to learn. And I know that we were sort of exchanging some quick little emails over the last week or so about, I guess, students sometimes saying they don't have anything to write about or where you gain inspiration from. And I guess I'm just wondering for you personally in your own poetic practice, what do you find to be most helpful as far as remaining inspired, or what do you look for when you're wanting to sit down and write? Are there any particular practices that you sort of keep with you?
Well, there's an old little bitty poem, Chinese poet Li Po, and it just says, the poet is a hollow bamboo. So that's it. That's the whole poem. He gets away cheap, 2 lines. But think about that. The poem is, the poet is a hollow bamboo. So it's a
Writing that down.
so yeah, it's a matter of, I think, attitude that you kind of walk in the world with that attitude that, I'm not, it's not about me. It's not about um, anything special in me. It's about, I'm going to just be a reporter, a receiver, a transmitter, a channeler, a hollow bamboo. And I'm going to walk through the world and with, sort of awe and appreciation every day. And let poems find me. Because I hear it, this, you talk about teaching is one of the things that I really enjoy seeing is when a poem finds someone, like where they've struggled to write, and all of a sudden, you've had the experience as a writer, and all of a sudden the poem takes shape and all of a sudden becomes its own entity, and it is that exhilarating, probably chemicals in the brain, dopamine or whatever that stuff is. But it's a tremendously enjoyable process. And all of a sudden it's, the mistake is, I think, all of a sudden thinking, oh, wonderful me. That's not it at all. Oh, lucky me, oh, lucky me, the poem has found me. And now I get to, be the hollow bamboo. And I think that attitude is so important. That, and then coupled with just that, like people talk about writer's block. I don't think there is a writer's block. They don't like to hear that because it's such a handy excuse. Oh, I've got writer's block, so I can't write anything. I don't think there is writer's block. I think that's where, willfulness is probably a problem for them, because all you got to do is just put the pen to the page and start writing anything right in front of you. And if you keep going, words find you, the topic finds you, language finds you. Bill Kittredge from University of Montana, wonderful writing teacher, he used to always talk about the generative and associative powers of language. Generative and associative powers of language. So it was like, if you start using language, it generates and associates with other language, and next thing you know, it's carrying you away. You're not so damn smart. Language is way smarter, and that's the kind of attitude. But really, what I want to do in this program today is it'd be really fun to look at some poems, and then it's fun looking for the seed of the poem. And you can almost, I think you can find it. I think you can find it in almost any poem. There's this moment where you can just see, oh yeah, that's where this poem began. Now the poet has shaped it and worked with it, and but that was it. That was the moment. That was the spark, and I think that's really fun.
Do you have any particular poems in mind?
Well, I told you about, everybody loves Mary Oliver, and I do too. And so The Summer Day, Mary Oliver's poem, The Summer Day. And I've got it, the cat is sitting on the poem right now, but I think I've got it memorized. So
the cat is the seed.
Yeah. So Mary Oliver, The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws forward and back instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly scrubs her face. Now she snaps open her wings and drifts away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is, but I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down in the grass, how to kneel in the grass, how to be idle and blessed and stroll in the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what more should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So,
It's funny that you picked this poem because my undergraduate degree is from Pacific Lutheran University, and they have an entire program there that is for first year and beginning students based on vocation. And their motto is, "What will you do with your one wild and precious life?"
yeah.
And so I am very familiar with this poem because of that, and then also because of just Mary Oliver in general. But um, do you feel like you have pinpointed the seed of this poem?
Yeah, I can just, I mean, I could be wrong, but like she's outside and like a little kid, the bug lands in her hand. And instead of just scraping it away, right? That's the poem finding her. And she looks at that very closely. She pays attention, she says, And in the poem, it goes from, like who made the world in this very general sense to this grasshopper. And not only this grasshopper, but look, these eyes, enormous and complicated eyes. Look how she scrubs her face, all those details. All that. Now, what she's doing is she is no longer just being Mary Oliver. She's appreciating the world outside herself and she's looking at it closely and she's writing stuff down. Mm-hmm. So probably I would bet, the poem starts with something like, I was walking around outside and a grasshopper landed in my hand. You know what I'm saying? And there, if I were writing that poem, that's what I would have done. I would have just wrote, kind of very prose lines about this is what I'm doing, walking around outside. And wow, I decided to take a look at that grasshopper and I was pretty amazed at all this stuff going on there. Isn't it amazing, the world, if you pay attention? And life is so short. Why don't we pay attention more often? And what are you going to do with your own wild and precious life? You can just see that poem building.
Right.
And it's not Mary Oliver sitting down saying, well, no, what smart things do I have to say today? It's just getting out there, walking in the world and letting the poem find you.
Right. I think it's interesting how you can have a very small or finite moment or image or experience that then allows you to sort of open up into a much bigger question. And I think, she sort of does this funneling of, she goes from very grand and big moments and questions to very microscopic moments where she's just really honed in and paying attention to something. But then she brings it back out again. And it's this sort of wave effect of what life is really like, your own personal experience to this outside world. And, she's really carrying the reader with her images and her questions and just sort of bringing you in and making you ask the question yourself while also asking you to pay attention to what is around you. And I think that's it's a very interesting poem because it's doing so much in just, it's not that long of a poem. It's one stanza, and it's asking the reader really to sort of to follow um, so many different, I guess, views or perspectives, because it is very real and tactile with the grasshopper and being outside, but she's asking these huge questions at the same time. Um,
Yeah,
and so
not answering
and
questions.
not
Yeah,
answering.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes. It's very open-ended, and it really invites the reader in to participate in the poem as well.
yeah.
So I think this is a great example, or I guess a poem that really showcases what a poem can do as far as um, taking the everyday and allowing the poet to sort of do anything they want with it.
There was a
So,
writing teacher in the long time ago where I came from, the 60s, where uh, named Ken McCrory, who's from like Michigan State or something. And he had a book called Telling Writing. And in there, he talked about fabulous realities. So that was his term, fabulous realities, right? And the whole idea was, if you open your eyes and you take the right perspective to things, everything is fabulous. I mean, if you landed on the earth as a being that has never seen what goes on here, it's all pretty strange. It's all pretty miraculous and wonderful, and entertaining and interesting and worth studying. It's fabulous, fabulous realities. So when I hear students say something like, "Oh, I just don't have anything to write about," I want to give them a little slap against the side of the face. What? Wake up! Wake up! And when I was poet laureate, people would always say to me, "Well, what is poetry?" You know, and it took me the longest time to answer that question because, uh, I still don't know what poetry is exactly, but uh, I began to say that poetry is the anti-anesthetic, anti-anesthetic. So many things in the world wants to put us to sleep. So many anesthetics out there want to lull us to sleep. I mean, TV, good Lord, and all the screens and things. What are they? What are we doing? We're falling asleep. And but poetry is the anti-anesthetic. Not just poetry. All arts are anti-anesthetics. They want us, instead of wanting us to sort of shut down our brains and shut down our feelings, the opposite is what art wants us to do. It wants us to open our brains and open our feelings. It wants us to expand our experience and share that experience. So I see that a lot with uh, uh, in teaching that it's a matter of really waking yourself, not any huge secret beyond just like what Murray Oliver is recommending. Pay attention, just pay attention.
yeah, I think that there's so much that you can engage with just in your own reality, that is outside of a screen. I think that there's a lot that can be learned from just observing, not even necessarily interacting. Just, there's so much to be learned from quiet moments that, I think we feel the need to fill our everyday with go, go, go and sound and just interaction, when really, if we slow down a little bit and we just stop and look around us, we can still interact. It doesn't have to be active interaction. It can still be sort of a self-reflective, passive interaction. I think a lot of what poetry has come to mean to me is just the ability to notice things that maybe aren't asked to be noticed, or um, to ask myself, why why is something this way, or how are these things related? But that's not something you have to ask outwardly, and on the page you're allowed to ask it any way you want. And so I think, this sort of slower observation, or just forcing yourself to notice what's around you, not just trying to get from point A to point B, or the end goal, I think is really important, and not something necessarily that we encourage younger people to do, because so much of what we encourage kids to do, I think, these days is to go from point A to point B, or reach your end goal, or be the best at something, when if we ask people to slow down, we're asking them to learn at the same time. It's not asking them to skip any kind of learning. In fact, you can learn a lot from just stopping for a minute.
Yeah. So my cat and your kids were, hey, let's do a little experiment here. My one daughter, Betrina, who's an artist, she's a songwriter and a dancer and a visual artist, and she's just very, very creative person. And at one point, I built a deck, and Betrina and I were sitting on the new deck, and Betrina's just quiet, and she's sitting there and sitting there, and she finally looks at me and she says, "What was the first board?" Meaning, where this deck is here now, where did it begin? Where was the seed?
Yeah.
Where do you
Mm-hmm.
start? And
Yeah.
so, do you have a poem in hand of yours? I'd like to hear a poem of yours, and
I can find one.
yeah, find one, and then let's just sort of do an experiment. Let's see if we can find the seed. Don't you tell me first. Let me try to guess, and then you can think about when you were writing it, where it maybe came from.
Okay, let me see here.
And I don't know what the prize is, but I'm going to win it.
Okay. It's called Pheasant.
It's called what?
Pheasant.
Pheasant, okay.
The pheasant's feathers are like gasoline or watercolors. Long, hook-necked bodies, down quilled into waxy skin. There is no death rattle enclosed in their swollen breasts, no muted beat in their thumbprint hearts. It is astonishing, the stillness. Even in death, their muddled wings are entwined, one bird enclosing the other, a closeness we never seemed to master. Your warm body still, mine a distant continent.
Wow, that's wonderful. Your husband's right. You're a great poet. That's really
Thank
nice
you.
poem. And maybe that one's too simple though, because it would sure seem that you're paying attention. You're looking closely at this feather, even from the first line. That it's like oil, or like like you've associated already from that thing right in front of you. And where's it going? Well, it becomes a bigger statement, doesn't it? But you start with that feather. I mean, am I wrong?
No, you're not. It was actually from just looking at, it's called a brace of pheasants that were in a market that really sort of captured my attention. I would walk by a butcher shop every day and see this pair of pheasants that were for sale, really, and it just was very sad and very beautiful to me to watch these two pheasants sort of embrace each other, and what that meant, and sort of try to relate that to people, but make it more about observing them as birds, and that was sort of the kernel, the seed of where that. I have a 4-year-old who is very much interested in what conversations mommy's having downstairs.
Yeah. So, I mean, even as you just described this experience in prose, of walking by the
Mhm.
butcher shop and all that stuff. So my guess would be you've got about 30 other poems in there too. There's a place behind this poem, right? A
Mhm.
location, and there's something that is resonant in the poem about the experience you're talking about and the object you're talking about. That is, now you're the hollow bamboo. Now all these things that are bigger than what just your experience and just your thoughts are beginning to take shape through language. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's interesting, I guess, um, when you feel like something calls to you or asks you to write about it. I don't know if I'm assuming this is sort of the same experience, or what you're talking about with the hollow bamboo is when you feel the need, or like you
Yeah,
feel
you can feel it.
compelled, have to you have to do it. It's not just I would like to write this thing, or
Right.
this would be interesting. It's much deeper than that. I have my little notepad where I have hundreds of just different words, not necessarily sentences or moments, but I can recall when I heard the word, or what the image the word triggers, that I know it needs to be written about.
Right.
And I think, I wasn't always good at writing down those things that triggered me in some sort of way, but it's very helpful, I think, to sort of keep track of those moments that call to you.
Right.
I know some students are very good about doing that, when they're practicing writing, and some students come to that later on. But I think, do you have any sort of do you stop what you're doing and do you write now, or do you have your little notepad, or do you just keep it in a little Rolodex in your mind, or how does that work for you?
Uh, there's no such thing as a Rolodex in my mind. I have trouble keeping more than two facts straight. But use the word trigger, and of course, Richard Hugo has years ago the book Triggering Town, and of course, what he did as a kind of prompt was he'd go out on the weekend and he visits some small Montana town, and he found those to be triggering. Something about them were, he was the hollow bamboo through which those little places spoke, in some way. Um, and so, we do a lot of things we call prompts as teachers. We give students writing prompts. And uh, I'm, I think prompts are a good thing, but I think oftentimes students misunderstand the goal is your success if you become unfaithful to your prompt. If somehow the prompt has just been a kind of
That's
springboard into
fantastic.
something else to come, you know. And
Yeah,
so, if you like, for instance, I use Sherman Alexie's grandmother poem, and then
I love Sherman Alexie.
and
Yeah.
little kids. I mean, little kids, but high school kids, college kids. Uh, See, they're all kids to me now. uh, you know, everybody's got something special about grandmothers, even, or it's in my case, it was kind of a lack of the grandmother that I could write about. Um, but grandmother's a prompt. Well, okay, so what if you said, okay, well, I'm going to take that Sherman Alexie poem and I'm going to emulate it to write about my grandmother. And you begin writing about your grandmother, but somehow grandfather always keeps coming in there. Well, don't say, go away, grandfather. Say, hey, I want to write about grandfather, apparently. What do you got to say, grandfather? And let him come in. And And I do that in silversmithing and jewelry. Is like I have a preconceived notion oftentimes that I'm very willing to give up very quickly, because it's the process and those accidental miracles that really make the thing better than I ever expected. So, I lose control in order to find something bigger than what I can manage. And so, like, it's wonderful in silversmithing if you can burn stuff up, and so you're working with a torch and metal, and all of a sudden, oh, what you'd pictured, what you was in your limited uh, goal in the world, now just burnt up and burnt a hole in it, curled an edge, something like that happened. Well, when I was a beginning silversmith, I used to think, oh darn, that's terrible, I just wrecked it. Now I go, where do I go now? What's happening? How do I follow this? And those become the best pieces. Absolutely become the best pieces. So I'll
I
give.
like your, oh, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just really like the idea of sort of the unfaithfulness to the prompt, because I think, um, especially for students, so much of how they function in school, especially, is to complete the assignment, um, to not necessarily, I guess, appreciate the journey, so to speak. And I think the idea of using the prompt as the jumping off point, but not necessarily completing it as the end goal. It's just sort of there to get you moving. I think is really important. I've been doing some work for Poetry Out Loud online on their social media, since social media is such a huge sort of way of communication for high school students now. And we do a couple prompts a week, but I think the idea of just sort of using that as a moment to enter into a writing space instead of completing an assignment is a really, really important way to look at it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's so. I taught for a lot of years in Coos Bay, Oregon, a summer workshop that
Mm-hmm.
was just
Yeah.
wonderful. So, I mean, it's like I'm not an ocean person. I'm born and raised in the Midwest, and lived in Montana half my life, and so the ocean is like just it's fabulous reality. It's all brand new. My eyes are open, and everything just sparkles. And I want to write about it all. Everything seems like a miracle, right? So we're in a writing workshop there, and we do this exercise where we just say, well, go out, you can stay here in the room if you want, or you could walk down the street in the neighborhood, or you go down to the beach, whatever you want. Let's take, half an hour, just take a little quiet walk all by yourself and see if you can bring home something small enough to hold in your hand that seems to have chosen you or called to you. That's kind of airy fairy language, but it's really true that, why do some things catch our attention and other things not? And so here we are at the beach, and I'm finding all this wonderful stuff, bits and pieces of creatures and rocks and shiny things. And I want to get a handful of it, and I can't decide what I want to use, to go back to do our exercise. And I choose something, and I go back up, and we get back in our writing table there. And so the assignment is, then the prompt is, like now look at this thing very carefully and choose 5 adjectives, to describe this thing, and 5 verbs. It's kind of an old exercise, but the twist is, once you've really done that and you really are now ready to write the poem you think you want to write, then you say, now take your object and pass it to the person on the left, and now you're going to write about that thing that comes to you from the other side. And some person who was bored with the ocean, never even left the room, and hands me a grapefruit. And I'm just like mad. I'm like, you idiot, how can you do this? but perfect. That's the perfect moment then for the poem to come, because now I'm out of control. Now it can find me, you know. Now I have to go, grapefruit, what do you have to say? You know. Well, same exercise in Coos Bay, and I came back, you know, with a wonderful thing or something, and somebody just hands me in the table. Then they hand me, I got to part with my wonderful thing, and they hand me this little bitty rock, you know, little bitty pebble, and you know, again, I have that feeling of, oh, yeah, I can't write about this. This is silly. You know, how could people be so crazy? You know, there's such wonderful stuff out there, and they give me this little rock. What's wrong with people? And but I just started writing, and I'll read you the poem. How about?
Yes.
Okay. So it's just called Listening. And, you know, I think that's exactly what it is. There's a line in here finally where I say, look at the pebble and say, well, what do you have to say? Right. So it's called Listening. A pebble caught in my shoe troubles my progress, halts me on a precipice along a well-worn path overlooking the surf. I sit in tall grass, undo laces, lift the pebble between my thumb and forefinger, and I ask what it has to say. Solitary, inaudible squeak, lost in the grand mashing of tides pounding the shoreline. But did I mention today is my 60th birthday? 3 score orbits on a big rock in the black empty. Well, not such a big rock, really, a pebble in comparison to our day star, even less to larger lights in the night sky. I pocket this quiet stone home and sit with it in my palm tonight, listening to the winds pummeling the dunes and the relentless ocean grinding. So that pebble, you can see how it's a seed, literally, of the poem, but then it becomes a poem about aging. You know, that poor pebble was a big rock at one time, you know, and it got to be a littler and littler rock. And I made the story up about it, finding it in my shoe, but that came later. First, it was, you know, like there's all sorts of things that were happening with in early drafts of the poem where it was just, you know, things about how amazing it is that this pebble was once a mountain, and, you know, all this philosophizing nonsense. But I had to write through that. You have to write through that to find the poem. And once this was a sort of poem, you talk about feeling that moment of wanting, of, you know, that, you know, something is ready to come through you, something is ready to be said. This was one of those poems that, you know, it's important because you can feel it in the end. It just, it's such a surprise. It feels so much smarter than I am, you know. And I always just feel this gratitude for it when it happens, you know, that there it is, you know. But again, it was that, yeah, I felt all like, oh, I can't write about this thing. I can't do it. You know, it's a stupid thing. But the act of just sitting down and doing it, you know, Hemingway's old thing of writing is the act of attaching the seat of your pants to the seat of your chair. That's really, really true. You know, it doesn't happen unless you start writing. You got to write, you know, and yeah, you write a lot of junk, you write a lot of garbage. You can't go, oh, I can't do this. You just got to keep going and have that faith that it's going to find you. You're not going to muscle your way into it. You're going to, you know, best thing you can do is give up and let it happen.
Well, and that's the beauty of revision also, I think, is, you know, unlike other artistic mediums, writers really have the luxury of being able to return again and again, and sort of test the waters and test whatever avenue they might think be calling to them in a poem, but ultimately, it's revision what sort of, and we're left with what we really want and what we really need the poem to say. So
Yeah, yeah. There's how much time do we have? Not much, I don't think, do we?
not much, I don't think. No.
I want to tell you a
We
wonderful
have another
story.
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Okay, I'll try to make this brief, but I think this story is just fabulously inspirational. I I teach mostly freshman comp, the old bottom of the heap college professor, college English professor teaching load. I love teaching freshman comp. I love teaching freshman comp better than I love teaching creative writing. And I get stories. I get wonderful stories from my students because I have them write about real life experience. And this one woman wrote that she had a son who went off to school, and she kept hearing from the principals and the teachers that, oh, he was a handful in school. And so they'd call her in, and she'd have to sit there on the hot seat and listen to how wrong her kid was and everything, and so she gets the brainy idea that she's going to take her kid out of public school and put him in the parochial school, the church school, because there he'll have more structure and rules, right? And so the poor kid, goes off to more structure and rules, and it's getting to be about Halloween time. And the teachers at the church school tell him, they say, well, we don't want you writing about like spooks and goblins and witches and things like that. I mean, we don't want you dressing up tonight with spooks and goblins and witches and stuff like that. We want you to come to our Halloween party dressed as someone out of the Bible. And so the little kid goes, all right, right? Now, that's a key, because most people are going, oh, crap, no, my Halloween is ruined. I can't, He said, okay, so he goes home and he cuts out this great big circle of cardboard, and he puts a hole in the big circle of cardboard, and he covers that whole circle with a hole in it with tin foil, and he puts it over his head, and he paints hideous purple and red blood coming down off his face and everything. And he goes marching into the church Halloween party, and everybody's horrified. They go, well, what are you? And he says, I'm the head of John the Baptist. So you see, I love that story because he saw that, there's no limitation, there's no writer's block, right? Even put up a block and I can get over that. There's richness out there, I can find it anywhere. That's the attitude you got to have. That's the attitude you got to take. That's a real creative spirit, that says, yeah, whatever's there, it can become my art,
That's great.
Yeah. So
Great. That's a perfect example, I think. I appreciate you saying that you don't believe in writer's block, so to speak, because you you have boundless inspiration. You just have to be willing to receive it. So I really
yeah,
appreciate that quite a lot.
yeah. Yeah, well, I look forward to reading more of your stuff. It was a curious poem. Yeah,
Oh, well, thank you.
yeah.
Hi,
You shall
Monica.
be.
You're back.
Hi. I like to be invisible a little bit, and but if you'd heard if I left my audio on, you would have heard me laughing a lot because you two are very entertaining, and especially you, Lowell. You always have great analogies and stories and examples for students to draw on, and it's one of the reasons why I appreciate you so much, and everything you've given to these young reciters and writers of poetry in Montana. You've been such a gift to this program, and I know the Poetry Elevated piece is new, but you're continuing your giving to that part of the programming too. And I'm just so appreciative that you carved out some of your day to spend with us. And this was such a great conversation. I hope that everyone listening, if they're not familiar with Lowell's writing, that they will find a book. And if you can't find one, I have some um,
I have a
that I
bunch that
can.
people could have for free.
Well, Lowell, you've been very kind to leave me with a few extra copies here and there. So if there are any teachers listening in um, who need copies of Lowell's work, I'd be happy to send them to you. And yeah,
And can
I
I just
just,
add that quickly,
yeah,
Monica? So
yeah.
I've done a couple of anthologies. Honestly, we would like to give them away. We still have many copies. It's hard to
Oh,
sell
you do?
poetry. Yeah, it's hard to sell
Yeah.
poetry. We used to give them away to the Poetry Out Loud participants. And I
Oh,
still have the
sure.
two poems across the big sky, and I have the big um,
Oh, great.
Poets of the American West anthology. And we
Oh, do
would give
you?
them
Good.
away. Let me know, and Hannah Kaufman, my assistant editor, would ship them off
Okay.
to you. Yeah.
Okay, I won't forget that you made that offer. And as you know, we like to give gift bags of journals and books to our Poetry Out Loud participants, but we're also looking for some ways to honor the winners of this poetry writing competition, which we are just about to put out the link for everyone, but you can contact us at Poetry Out Loud at mt.gov, and we'll send you all the information if you don't already have it. But February 5th is the due date for submissions to this year's contest, and we have some special things planned, ways to honor the writers who, the fact that we even try to, judge is a little bit fraught, but we're gonna try to honor a top couple of writers in this contest alongside honoring our top reciter at state finals. So thank you, thank you
Yes,
so
thank you
much for
so
this
much.
time, both of you. This has
You're
been
welcome.
great, Lowell.
Enjoyed it. Nice meeting you, Kaisa. Yeah,
It was nice
Yes,
meeting you too. Well, thank you so much for your time.
thank you.
we'll hopefully be in touch soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you.